continue. Awesome. Yeah, it's just good to sort of, as we talk through that way, if the things that are shared that I need to remember, or if I happen to say something clever that I kind of, that is worth it keeping, then that would be awesome. So so that's recorded. And it also, if you've got the capacity, I think you can do it so that I could share screen too, and I can then bring up those two docs and we can just talk through that as well.
I should be able to let me just make sure.
Usually it just becomes, it looks like I might
it looks like you should be able to share.
I think I probably have already got it. The funny thing was, Kate, I was so organized. I actually had a meeting this afternoon that was a standing one that we have on a Thursday, and he wasn't feeling too well, so that was kind of easy to sort of say, well, that's okay, and I need to leave early in any case. And then I had a new client that I was just setting up today, and then where you get so entranced and you get back into the work you were doing, and then I'm looking at the time, I'm like, oh goodness, it's like 2 minutes past. So apologies for you beating me on my own platform, and for my platform not talking how it should. Have you had a bit of a break over New Year's?
Yeah, I had a good break just before Christmas, and then I've just had a few more days. So I've been very lucky. My executive director's been happy to let me take some extra leave at this time of year, because it's not quite as busy as I know it's going to get. So.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And are you and the family all being able to stay well in what's happening at the moment?
Luckily. My sister did have COVID last week, but she had very mild symptoms and has since recovered. But otherwise, nobody else in the family has had it. So we've all been pretty careful and locked ourselves up, really.
Hasn't it been, it's sort of, we've gone from not really knowing, I don't know if it's the same for everybody, but certainly I feel like we didn't really know too many people that were being impacted. And then all of a sudden it feels like now we know lots of people that are being impacted, so albeit with hopefully a more, hopefully we're all covered a lot better than we were earlier, and that the hospitalizations and that sort of stuff that don't seem to be as bad. So that's the upside, isn't it? Yeah, my eldest son had it a couple of weeks ago, and he was like, Dad, it's just a tickle in my throat, but I'm fine. Sort of thing. It's like, okay, but it is that thing. You don't want to get it just because you don't know, right? You don't want to be that one person, right? So
and for me, I definitely don't want to share it with elderly parents or aunties or anything. So,
that's for sure. Well, listen, how about I share this screen and we have a chat, and because you had sort of let me know a little bit around the organization and your involvement and how long and that sort of thing previously, it's sort of probably a bit of that, as well as what I sort of did via the docs, that I'll probably ask you a few questions, and then you might have some feedback for me around it as well. Rightio. So that's weird. There we are. You can see that okay? Is that coming through now for you? Awesome. Cool. With these audits, the first thing we do, and clearly it's slightly different as you explained to me, it is going through a brand change in any case, right? And so with the name, the new name, and then you shared with me as well the look and feel of the conference, which was really, it looks really good. It's going to be, I actually even used one of the, I thought, that's quite, that's something that, if we were going to be doing it, that you'd want to sort of update accordingly with your socials and that sort of stuff. So it's probably timely if you're doing web refreshes, and then, the social media to go with it. That's what we'll do. But there is, so in some ways, there's a bit of a duplication in a couple of things that I did, because I'm thinking, well, actual fact, this is a new name, so it's clearly not going to come up. So let's have a look at what some of the historical sort of stuff happens a little bit here as well. What I did find interesting is that firstly, we do often expect to see ads with commercial type enterprises coming up, but this, I imagine, is somebody else, right? The AC.
Yes, they are a small not-for-profit based in Queensland, and they mainly do fundraising. We don't have a strong relationship with them, but we do deal with them from time to time.
There is some relationship. So what will happen, particularly once you know, websites are named fully. See, at the moment, I'm pretty sure. So this was using the actual name, right? The Australian Centre for Prevention of Cervical Cancer. And so one of the first things we'd want to do is actually rename that Google map as well, because generally speaking, something you can own on Google, and your two Google products being, you know, Google itself, and then having that Google map with the address where the VCS Foundation does have. When I go down further, I see there is a map that exists. But yeah, creating that and having that in there. In fact, it would just be a rebranding of that, I would suggest, right? Of your current Google My Business profile. It's just a rebranding exercise, right? So that's the first thing. As I said, it is always interesting when ads come above, because it does bump you down a little bit. And it's fair to say, given it's about to be, it's a rebranding, it's happened in November, you know, hence not much is showing, you know, in this early days. Membership, UICC, what is that one? Is that another?
That's a global body based in Geneva. So we're a member of the UICC. It's the, what is it called? The International Union of Cancer Control is the name in English. Yeah.
So you can see how that's interesting, because even that, it looks like it was something that you did on the 6th of December, right? So again, it's picking up on that and that name. LinkedIn clearly has been already renamed. And so again, it's it's not unusual for LinkedIn to be one of the more powerful of the socials. And so in this case, having a company page, clearly, you know, search and social kind of do go hand in hand. One does typically help. You know, you don't do social for the sake of search, and you don't do search for the sake of social, but they do kind of blend into one another to some degree, right? Even the fact that I talk about Google, because I can actually run updates, and that's what we do as well. We post updates now to Google. You might have heard of Google Plus back in the day. It was a failed attempt by Google to become a Facebook-like platform. It didn't work, and so they got rid of it. But what they've added to Google is some elements that are similar. And so, and the post updates are one of those elements. And yeah, so, and then clearly there's probably another thing. This was an article, and given you're in the communications, you might have had a hand in this article in the
definitely. We did a big push around our name change and funding announcements from the Commonwealth Department of Health. So yeah, November was a very large month.
So it's probably, you know, and so in some ways it's a strength of what you've done that probably then is what's then bringing up these early doors. They're not typically, you know, the things that I would, you know, there's other ways that the mechanisms that we would use from the socials, and you'd expect your socials to actually, and particularly a website, your rebranded website with its actual name, they'll become the main focus, and all this other stuff will actually slowly get pushed away. But it is often interesting things that happen. So even your early communications, sometimes earliest, particularly from Google's perspective, is actually what hangs around the longest from a proofing perspective, you know. So but yeah, so Google My Business is sorry, they don't call it Google My Business anymore. It's the Google Business Profile, is the main thing that we'd want to update, I think, rather than having to create for you. Having said that, there probably hadn't been a lot of work done on the Google profile in the past. So you can see when what's that? Sorry.
If any would be my guess.
So clearly it may well be, in fact, that Google may well have created it. I don't know. So clearly what happens if Google camera goes past and it sort of picks up and it knows there's an organization there, this may well have been created by Google. In fact, this actually talks about, do you own this business? Although that's not unusual. Often it is the case is we have to claim businesses, and it will often ask whether we own it. But clearly here, when you, as the VCS, you don't actually, the interesting thing is there's no ad sitting above you from a VCS Foundation perspective. And there is that map. So as I said, you may as well use that existing map to just update and claim and just rebrand, because then you'd have some of your imagery. So what often makes Google Profile stronger is a weight of imagery. So basically, you know, and often that can just be imagery, the same imagery that you're using from websites, from conferences, whatever it might well be. Google loves imagery. right? So, and it is that thing of, so clearly you want to have, which possibly isn't here at the moment, you'd have a, the logo for the business showing there. You'd have a cover page. So it does enable you to have a cover. And so often the cover is the same cover we use across everything. And often it's a cover that's very visible from the website as well. So one of the things we'll see in a second is, I like that one of, that there was maybe a picture of just women that was used for the conference. That's the sort of cover you could use across everything, that sort of image, right? Because then it's about branding, right? So it doesn't need to necessarily even be heavily branded. It's almost becomes, those women become almost the heroes of the brand. For the business, and also there's some logical sequencing as well. So it doesn't really matter where people saw you first or found you, whether they did a search on Google or whether it was a Facebook post or something on Twitter or wherever else. Then when they go across to the website and they say, oh yeah, that's the logo, that's the brand, it avoids any confusion around who they're looking at and who they're finding more about. So and so, yeah, interestingly as well, so it's quick enough to pick up on the fact that it clearly used to use the VS Foundation as its LinkedIn, and maybe that's the main change that was made on LinkedIn is the name, because it's still got your LinkedIn up there. And it looks like, as you said, there may well not have been a lot of social done even for the VCS Foundation in the past.
We really only started doing any social media in late, when was it? Gosh, COVID time has made me so confused. I think it was late 2020.
Yeah, okay.
And prior to that, we'd hardly done any at all.
Yeah. But even that's late enough to think that things would come up. So maybe what the element is probably, had I done this sort of desktop sort of thing, mid 2021 before the new name comes in, maybe then it does. But often what typically happens is, particularly for any organization, right, we've sort of moved from directory sites to social sites. So in the past, often directories, whether we chose to be on those directories or not, someone put us on it. Often people will have, who are not-for-profit organizations, right? And so you'll get whacked on it, and somehow that might start to be one of your more sort of key players. Often they may well get some way $1 out of doing that, right? So in terms of if they're finding it via them first. But clearly the most obvious that is if you think about yellow pages back in the day, so directories, a lot of directories got shifted online from offline, right? So hence directories were the first sort of play in, and that's what we do often expect to see. And you're right, it's I probably doesn't hurt at the moment. Actually, I could be on the real site, but for the sake of this, we'll show you later if you haven't had a look already, but we've been sort of taught to read websites top left. Actually, I will go to the website because it's probably not fair to look at it. It is just, let me go. I should have kept the links for the different two. Should I go to the, it's just the VPS Foundation website at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, Foundation.
VCS rather than PS.
Oh, what did I say? VPS. That's my fat thumbs, I think. VCS, yeah, Foundation. There we are. There probably is a VPS Foundation. That's sort of already. So, it's just easier to see this as a square. I can't remember how I saved that image. Yeah. So we've been. It's pretty close, but we've been taught to sort of read. And the good thing now is your name spells out what it is you do, right?
Yeah.
As against your previous name, right?
That's exactly why we changed it.
Yeah.
And so to constantly tell people, what do we do?
Yeah, and so your just do it doesn't have to sit under here because it's already telling us what you just do, and then you're kind of using these sort of banners to tell us, imagine this. Global elimination of cervical cancer. So it's quite powerful. And as I said, even, I think as a professional website, clearly at the moment, the fact that it's lost because of the VCS.org, I'm assuming URLs will get updated with the ACPCC.
Yes, and We've got a new website that's been built, but at the moment it's been designed and built out, but it's waiting for content. So it's going to look a lot more like that conference website. I'll just see what I can. Don't know how much I think at the moment it's still just, it's really just that placeholder at the moment with Marion's picture and a quote.
So from a content from a social media content distributor, there's well and truly sufficient content on this, right? So there's significant in terms of written. I think we spoke about that last time. The question is how much. So typically, you know, we would share resources for practice. It's actually very close to something one of my very early clients was the Australasian College of Behavioural Optometrists. I don't know if you've ever come across them. That was described to me at one stage, look like Kairos for the eyes, really, because they're kind of just to the right of the optometrist. You know, they're kind of a different, and maybe have a slightly different thinking around things as well. But with them, we were sort of posting in the morning often for the parents of the children that they kind of wanted to explain, you know, why it was worth seeing a optometrist, or in this case, a behavioural optometrist. And then in the afternoon, we were posting about upcoming conferences and information for the practitioner themselves, right? So in some ways, there's some similarities in terms of what you have here, right? So you've got your two target audiences. Would that be fair to say? Probably multiple. Potentially, there's more than two target audiences. We've
got a lot of target audiences, but I'd say they're probably in two main camps. One is the healthcare practitioners, Australian healthcare practitioners on the whole. And then the other is a very broad church of, you know, policymakers, program managers, philanthropists, global health bodies, medical colleges, that kind of thing, who might be looking at our website for information about our conference, for example, or clinical guideline updates, or this is my cat Jinx, I think you might be seeing right now. He joins nearly every meeting. And we've actually just gone through a really helpful customer journey mapping exercise as part of the design of the new website, where we literally mapped out, well, who are they? Who are all our stakeholder groups that we want to visit the website? Why do we want them to visit? What do we think they'll be looking for? What's the call to action? What are the gaps in our current website? So that's a very, very helpful piece of work to look at if we're starting to think about.
And that's significantly more advanced than so in terms of what we often are involved in, right? So in terms of, you know, that web development, but we get the benefit of that, right? So clearly, so for us, in many ways, without dumbing it down too much, it's really to take the website to the people into the social feeds with little microbyte portions to say, and now if you want to find out more, you can call, visit, or, you know, whatever so we effectively, we use a repurposing approach to educate. And we then, and a large part of that is, where can I find out more? We're not about doing long form. I mean, things like Twitter, you can't do it, right? So you're limited by how much. So the idea is give them enough. Usually the imagery becomes important. So a weight of imagery is good for content marketing, right? So the sorts of things like the little girl in the background with mum, you know, that sort of stuff. And like the things you were sort of showed me around the conference one as well. So I'm sure that's been part of it. So people, you know, that whole what's in it for me, people want to understand why it is that. So in a way, the visual is a visual clue. Oh, this is, you know, this is for women and it's for this particular health and those sorts of things, right? So, but from a social media perspective, you've mentioned around, you know, calls to action. So that clearly is, at the moment, the most prominent call to action is probably a contact us, right? But having said that, people are lazy. So even clicking on a contact us, right? So which we could do, but often what we recommend you do is you actually have your key, whether it's you know, the typical 1300 or the number that people might call. An email, people often will use the little email box, or in actual fact, you can actually put the email up the top here, but it's also where your 6 main socials normally feature, right? So
Yeah.
you'd normally have your Facebook icon, your Instagram, your LinkedIn icon, your Google map, so people can see where it is they can review you and find you,
Okay. Yep.
and your YouTube channel. So
Yep.
generally speaking, those 6 socials are the key 6 socials, and they
Yep.
go up next to where you can contact us. Most corporates, it's interesting, put it down the bottom in the map, right? As in when I say the actual map of the website, but that's asking me to scroll down, and I may or may not be be inclined to do that, and B,
Yep.
you know, that sort of saying around how quick you've got people to get their attention. So
Yeah.
particularly from the across all the pages, from a social proofing, it's often best to have all your key contacts so I can easily and quickly do it. And particularly for old timers, people a 10-year swing of me, and it particularly males, but it's really worthwhile. They're still going to want to pick up the blower, you know, often,
Yep.
right? Or if they've got something more in depth they want to talk, they possibly want to put it on an email, you know. So we don't have to make them go to social media. And when we do make them go to social media, we want them to go away from the website. So it's always important, I'm sure your web people may have said this to you, but any socials should open in a new tab.
Yeah.
So it's really important to have them open in a new tab, because otherwise they may forget all about the fact that they started on your website. If it opens over the top, even if it goes to your Facebook page, they may get caught up in Facebook land or whatever social media they've clicked on, right? And you know, so that's just an important thing to remember. So
they should see all of those options come up when they click on contact us. So a phone number, an email.
Well, what we suggest, and without sort of I could probably just as easily go, but this is by, you know, we do try and talk about so this is whether you're on our homepage or whatever, you pretty much can know how to contact us, and you can see our social media up the top there, right? So it and most look, sounds like your website, I doubt it's probably on a much more higher platform than a WordPress potentially. Sometimes they can just. It is on WordPress, right?
Yeah.
So on WordPress, I mean, because it is a good platform, it's just about how many layers you're adding to WordPress. We're definitely on WordPress. There's a template that basically says we just want our social media icons and our contact details up the top. So that's what I was had in mind, that it would be good for you. It just proves to you as a business it's just not about pushing information. Because the other thing that you can put in there by way of and I put it on the bottom of mine, but you can have these plugins, right, to show that not only are you do you have the social medias, you are active with your sharing on the social medias as well. So you're sharing, and you're part of a community of sharing, right? So generally Facebook and or Insta are the best two. A lot of people use Insta because Instagram, sorry.
We don't currently use Instagram. And we don't use Facebook as much as Twitter and LinkedIn, mainly because we're not a heavily consumer, general public facing organization. And so most of our kind of audiences on social media are practitioners, people in the scientific community, researchers, test manufacturers, policymakers, that sort of thing. So we just figured that those platforms might be a little bit better, the LinkedIn and Twitter. Yeah,
I think I would suggest to you that firstly, I'd suggest in our model, you're best owning all of them, right? You want to own them all. And in fact, you do want to have activity in them, because many of them, how you communicate, although we use a model that pretty much you communicate the same message across all the pages, there's different people on all those different pages, and there's different advantages to all those different pages. But for what you've just said, I would completely agree. The most logical one to put on there is just to have your Facebook, probably your Facebook feed, just so people can see, and they can also see who else follows the page by doing that often, right? The feed, the plugin that you put in there. So and the other, what we'll talk about later, there's a little thing that there's a bit of a pixel code that you can put behind the web. side as well, which helps measure how many people are visiting through the website pages, right? So that's the other thing. Yeah. So I'll show you that on the little infographic. Yeah, we do sort of show that. So yeah, so the website, but as I said, even in its current format, it's not an unappealing website. But as you said, there's room to do things, you know, different because of the branding change. And I just put this in here just so I was across the fact, okay, that's the new brand. Even on the proposal, I think that I put to you, I would simply use the icon. I think to use the logo on many things, particularly once you get down to mobile, people aren't going to be able to read any of that. And you can see, I mean, that's probably how I've taken that, but often it does have the risk of probably bleeding out as well. So so and then I just had a look, so I was aware of what you know, what, as you mentioned, the new design and type, you know, and I love, you know, this is very inclusive, this sort of imagery, and this stuff works on social media, anything that's real. So as in real imagery. So these ladies here are far more, what's the word? We resonate with this image more so that as soon as people start to put print, you know, even not to say that this isn't fine on the website, but the need to actually start putting you know, APCC and the logo and things along those lines, it can actually, there's a measure where it gives professionalism, and beyond professionalism, it starts to rink of, I don't know if I want to see this in my feed. You know what I mean? Because often it's in between something that Kate's posted or Steve's posted or your other network of doing. And so ultimately when businesses and brands are posting, it can jar if it's heavily canvassed or it's got, that side of things. So real images, real people work best.
Yeah.
And you are very much what your LinkedIn looks like, which so make it very easy to know I had the right person on the call. Generally with whoever we're working with, you know, we want to make sure that they're all staff for their own business. So, you know, clearly one of the things, and this doesn't, your background image here doesn't have to be of a image relating to ACPCC. It can be something that just, you know, helps bring you out of the page. It shows you as a professional, you know, in the way you're in. Similarly, a lot of people, and I'm not sure about yourself, but often have more than one hat, right? So within here, yes, you can make it that you're the director of communications and you've done a lot more than many. What people often you'll see in their LinkedIn, it'll just say director, right? So you know, the obvious add-on that you could add to yours, director of communications, is almost that aiming to eliminate cancer. You could actually add that little bit at the end, right? That's sort of almost your call or your catch cry in terms of what and how you do things. And clearly, I could, you know, by way of you are associated with your business or with the company page, and many people, you know, haven't done that. So so you've got that connected in. But as I said, our main focus is to make sure that you're the best representative, and not just you, potentially, if there is others in the organization, in some ways you become the template of what you want to be seen as doing, you know, because you know, the CEO and those sort of ones, for instance, at times, you know.
Yeah, definitely. And Marion does use, she's our executive director, she does use LinkedIn quite often. So yeah, I'll make that suggestion to her.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. And so with the actual LinkedIn company itself, so my suggestion, as I said already, on all the socials, I'd go with icon only. The need to actually put logo, when you've actually got it on everything, it will always have Australian Centre for the Prevention of Cervical Cancer below it anyway, or next to it. So the actual need, you just want people to start to resonate that that's what you're your logo, your icon is.
Mm.
And I would use standardized, you know, if these are the people, so these people clearly look exploratory to me. The thing is, if they are the people, then use them on everything. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if you're going to go with
They
one,
are
choose
real
one.
staff
Yeah.
members in our lab.
Yeah, they're in the lab. So, you know, as I said, I think there's a likelihood that they'll probably get rebranded with, so you actually show the people you're helping rather than the people that are helping. But I think either way is a good way, you know, so, you know, is to use both. So, you know, often when people are running businesses, let's say for argument's sake, this was, well, this is a business, let's face it, just happens to be a not-for-profit business, but, you know, for themselves, often what I'll say to people, maybe you would use a secondary. So for instance, if it was Kate and it was applicable, you might have the ladies that you've got on the conference behind as your cover, right? Happy, healthy ladies. And then this might be the, that's, well, so depending on which one you thought is secondary or primary image, right? So, you know, secondary images then are generally the ones we suggest people put on their own profiles. And then primary image, what is the real image that you want people to know and resonate with for the company, right? So that's just the content marketing. So ultimately you would have heard the term content marketing, and realistically you're in communications. So let's face it, content marketing communications is really just about what we say and what we look like. So it's just the visuals and the wording. And so anything that we can help in the visuals to help people get a clue and know that it's us. I don't know, you could tell me if I'm wrong, but it's probably too early doors. Had you been posting through the page as yet? Have there been any posts done on the LinkedIn?
Through the website, do you mean?
So on the LinkedIn page exists. But does
there's definitely been posting.
There has been some posts done. Okay.
Last year, but we've been using it because we did a PR campaign late last year for the Victorian government about self-collection.
Okay. So what we normally suggest, whether it's extra small to small, we're sort of posting every day. And as I said, those are about posts. But that's not to say when you've got exemplary things and things like rebranding and conferences and launches, those sort of things often lend themselves to, you know, they're often things that may well be, as you said, it's the communication piece, the press release that went out, right? So, or it's the blog or whatever it might well be. And often those things might get promoted, you know, so you might promote those sort of ones. But yeah, so the habit of what makes things powerful, and actually, in fact, because you do have them, we spoke a little bit about this, but I did see that there was VCS, digital health.
And we need to get rid of that.
Yeah, altogether. So ultimately, that's what I was going to say. It might be that you delete these sort of ones and you sort of then have it that they're sitting under, it's more, what do they call it? The streams of business that you actually run.
Yeah, and that was, this particular LinkedIn was set up by some previous employees that worked in digital health and hasn't been used since. And we don't want to have it perceived.
Will you be able to get access to it? Do you know?
Will depend if
there is a way of claiming pages that are yours, but clearly the easiest way to get access is to go to whoever that previous employee was and ask, can you please give me access because I'm, you know, so
I don't think we can do that. Unfortunately, the relationship with the previous employee went very, very south.
So were they the only ones though that had access?
I don't know the answer to that. I would have thought that Denise, our executive director at EA, probably should have had access. So I will ask her if she is able to.
Yeah, well, often as well, it's particularly on LinkedIn, often it's the HR person.
Yeah, and I mean, Denise certainly did have access to our main VCS Foundation LinkedIn, but she had forgotten that she had access. So
she
might be able to do a forgot password and change it.
That's the easiest. The other way is you can claim pages, but as you said, it would just be purely claiming the page to delete it. Really, I think so.
Yeah.
Yep. so then, actually, I'll make this just a little bit bigger over here. So I'm not sure why I've, just let me, I've got my little icons down below that are annoying me. I'm going to just swap them off and bring them across. 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
Go. Yeah, so so this was the Facebook page. So again, and look, I know it's early doors and that sort of stuff, and it's not been look at the same sort of what would be, even when you've changed your name, I wouldn't use that as the cover. I'd use, even if you go to the current, so and then you do it as a post or something, or rather that, and maybe pin that post that you've changed your name. But again, anything that's along these lines, that, as I said, may look good on certain brochures and different things, aren't the best ideally for here. So everything, if we, everything on social, try and go real and that sort of thing.
And it's time now, it's been since November that we changed our name. I think it's time to take those posts down.
Yeah. I actually, these sort of posts, that's what I was going to say, from a visual perspective. In fact, it's interesting, you actually got a bit of love around that for a page that, you've not got a massive following. So just so, just to understand Facebook. So I don't imagine any advertising has ever been done on this. Is that be fair to say? No.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about it in a second, but understanding that Facebook's algorithm is very ungenerous, depending on what you do. Now, you're because of what you do, you would hope that people would be applauding, and it's not just simply educational, but it's what's the word, it's it's impactful is probably the best word, right? And so a post like this, so there's a couple of things that impact the algorithm. So on a normal run of things, if you've got 100, let's call it 200 people following the page, and if you're posting every day or every second day, on a very good day, you might get 20 people seeing that post in the feed. 20, right? Clearly, because of how this was shared and because of maybe who's in it, this would have been seen by you on yours. If you've got access to the stat, I reckon this would have been seen by probably more than, or as many people that follow the page potentially, right? Because of how many people engaged with it, right? So even there, let's say this got seen by 200 people, as an absolute awesome result. Probably the cost to actually get that sort of reach, 200 people, is about 50 cents. As soon as I spend $1, right? So that's the benefit. So what they work like nowadays on Facebook. Facebook is very what's the word? So very ungenerous when it comes to organic algorithm.
Okay. Yeah.
But they're fair dinkum back to 2012 with their dollar. I reckon you actually get more for your dollar spend now than you did when I was first starting out, because there's actually different campaigns that you could do, right? So in the past, in fact, even on my little infographic, I still use it's actually, it's not true. I used to use this sort of spend $5 and you probably can get up to 10,000 reach. But now, depending on what campaign you do, we've got clients that are spending $5 a day. So let's call it 150 a month, roughly. 150 a month. And they may have, depending on what time of COVID it was, with people being at home, they've got 30 to 40,000 people seeing their posts, right? Just because of the ad that's running, right? So as I said, the two work well. So the reality is with, from a communications perspective, and particularly from an ads perspective, there's only two reasons that we do marketing, communications, and ads. Firstly, it's to get new people involved with us or following us or whatever it is that we're hoping to achieve from those people. And the second thing, by doing the habit of posting every day or every second day, is to get those people that already follow us to engage with us and tell other people about us. So in other words, retention marketing and new clientele, new business, if you like. So the reason we sort of do and suggest that the dollar spend around ads is because it doesn't take much. There is some changes in what and how. It's more around wording and the type of people you could target. And it's clear that the sort of things that you're doing, we just have to be very mindful of the wording that gets used because of, anything that talks to gender and gender and even disease, so even fighting disease. We just need to be sure that the way that we're doing it and the way that we target it, it is in such a way that it sort of can't be in any way seen as belittling or whatever, or you know what I mean? So it's just one of those weird, and let's face it, Facebook at one point, we've got one of our clients is Awards Australia, right? And one of their major sponsor is Channel 7. And at one point, remember last year when Facebook and the mass media, the Australian media, kind of went into a bun fight?
Yeah,
exactly. So they actually shut down Awards Australia, fortunately only for one day. We refuted it. We argued it.
Yeah.
It did come back within a day, but I think they gave all the Australian media back within a week or so as well. So, but yeah, so it's just that sort of at times just being working out how to best post. The other thing is, but it is once you do spend $1, it does give you that capacity then to have conversations with Facebook, to be able to say, hey, we're not happy, or can you fix this sort of thing? So I use Facebook ads support to actually fix a number of things at times for our clients.
Okay.
Yeah. So as soon as you spend $1, they do listen, right? So the good thing for us is because even if it's not you that spent $1, they go on the fact that, well, I'm involved and because I've spent $1 with others. So there's an element of, which is good in terms of fixing problems at times. So as you said, there's no Instagram there at the moment, but I would absolutely recommend that you have it, and it's just integrated with the Facebook page. Particularly for the target audience that you are most relevant to. The women target audience, well, they're the more active on social media, but on Instagram particularly as well, right? And relatively nowadays, it's basically one and the same platform. Facebook owns it anyway.
Yes,
right?
that's true. They do own it.
And as soon as we advertise, you've got your call to action that can go on there and that sort of stuff too. Otherwise, more or less, it's just a way of distributing your information and your imagery. Oh, you do have your Twitter. Yeah. So you did have Twitter, which is a lot like a lot of corporate, and makes sense with conferences and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, we get pretty good engagement with Twitter. We've got a lot of colleagues, so there's a lot of you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours with posts, and
and learned colleagues. Well, the other thing around Twitter, in terms of making sure that your algorithm is is turned on, but Twitter actually lets everything down through the keeper, right? So all of a sudden it looks like, oh wow, look how many people have seen our tweets, but the problem is the tweets go through so fast. Whether or not anybody is actually doing much about them.
Engagement is a whole other thing, right? Yeah.
So the same sort of thing, without laboring point, the stuff probably like this sort of stuff are the much better sort of things to do, right? So and there's probably a lot, and as you kind of mentioned, the other thing, particularly around setup and our planning. So when we talk about setup, we talk about just making sure all the channels are set up correctly and branded and saying all the things they need to say and being able to integrate back into websites. When we talk about planning session, it's making sure that you're actually strategically connected and getting the attention of all your relevant partners. So that, and it sounds like you may well have done that on on Twitter. It's probably good to do it on all the platforms potentially.
I'd say we haven't done anything particularly strategic with our channels because none of us really know anything. So just to give you the picture, I'm the first comms director I think that they've ever had, but I don't have a comms background at all.
Okay.
The organisation has never invested very heavily in communications or marketing. Or media relations or anything like that, but we are absolutely recognising that we need to do that, and part of my role to try and get us there, but I don't have any resources to help me. So I did have a staff member doing social media, but she's now moved into another role. I hired someone just before Christmas, but they didn't work out, and unfortunately we had to let them go
and I
about
think
a week ago.
and often, to be fair, without sort of sprouting our own, it's almost unfair to bring people into organizations to do social media where it hasn't been done before. You know what I mean? Or if it hasn't been strategic in the way that's done before, as you said. So often it's how and it doesn't matter what the business is, it's often how it comes to me, right? And it often in many ways, in this case, it's great because in some ways we're looking at greenfield here because it's a rebranded exercise and it's greenfield. I remember a business coach once saying to me, because people will often say to me, "Oh, I've already got my Facebook page," and and he says, "Yeah, well, I should charge you double then," because often the issues involved, and even we just mentioned one previously, right? That let's say at the moment that previous employee actually had their hands on the one you want to have your hands on, right? And that it's often, we don't find it's malicious, those sort of ones, but often it's more like, "Oh, my sister's niece did it. Oh, can you get in touch with her?" "Oh no, I got no idea how we could get in touch with her," right? So it's often easier just to create them rather than have to try and revise them at times. But usually, having said that, there's always ways to skin a cat, so we can get there. But yeah, strategic is about, so more's my point is that in a way, if we were to go through an exercise, you would actually possibly find that at some point, if you wanted to ditch Steve and you wanted to expand the broader footprint of what somebody might do, you almost can roll them in, because often people don't pay for two of us. Dare I say, I don't like doing myself out of a job, and people replicating what we do is often flattery. But generally, also we know that often they come back because the other thing is it's actually quite good for us to be able to hold the hand. So, for instance, let's say your remit, I'm sure, is quite broad of what you've been asked to do, right? So let's say the next time you were to bring in, and so it then means that you can almost be, what do they call it? Almost like the spot from government speak, because I think you and I both have that bit of government background, right? So government speak is that you would be then the sponsor. And then the social media / other communications aid that you've got then can actually be the champion that sort of deals with somebody like me on a day-to-day basis, right? So that's the other thing, is that you still might get that person in, but it actually might give you greater capacity for that person, maybe to be more like a copywriter, for instance, or whatever else you see might be appropriate, to write blogs and things along those lines. But having said that, you might also choose just to go, okay, I will just outsource a little bit here and outsource a little bit there, if that's how the organization also chooses to work. So I don't know.
Yeah, well, look, I'm keen to outsource as much as I can at the moment, because I just don't have any capacity to be creating posts. So I wanted to ask you the question too about, like, how does that actually work if we went into a management, sort of a monthly management plan? Does your team create the posts, send them to us for approval, or do we give you the content and then get you to turn it into a post? How does it work?
Yeah, we will get to that, but the reality is we create the post. We use a particular platform to do that. If you wish to, you could actually view those posts before they went out, because we schedule a week in advance.
Oh, great.
Yeah. The post that we schedule, as I said, we repurpose website content. So hence so effectively we take the information from the website almost as is, right? So and then we might add some emojis, or we might and we certainly would add hashtags and a call to action at the bottom of posts, right? You can see the couple of posts that had been done, there was no actual then call to action beyond those, I don't believe. So even sometimes people will just put a link in, but it's sort of like, well, okay, that's better than nothing on the one hand, but sometimes it just sort of sits there and it's like, what the heck? So basically, to give you an idea, it would be just something along the lines of, to learn more, visit, or if it's relevant, call, walk in, so it just tails off. So essentially we usually almost top and tailing posts, if that makes sense. So it's coming from a particular area. Let's say it was the digital part that, you know, we were talking something around digital, then we would basically then provide the little snippet of information, and the page where we got it from would be in the little call to action that tells people where to go. Hopefully there's potentially imagery we can use that you have that is on websites. And even if it's the new website, often if people don't have that, then we'd have to sort of say, well, okay, are you happy for us to use to use imagery of, and it might be that we're using women, you know, in a, you know, happy women. I don't know what, if that's what the sort of thing in the short term. And often so we do it in two ways. For many of our clients that don't have enough imagery, firstly, we're always suggesting put as many images onto the website, or at least into the Dropbox for us that we can use. And secondly, if they don't have it, then we might use a combination of free to use imagery as well as your own imagery, you know. So
we're currently using quite a lot of free to use imagery, but I am planning to get a photographer to come in and get a whole lot of new shots for us as well, because we're going to need to populate the website. So.
Yeah, and I think with photography, certainly either getting them in, I think almost that seems to work out better. I don't know what photographers' rates are, but I sort of, you know, let's say even a day shoot might be $1,500 for argument's sake. My understanding, if you go through stock, you know, whatever the Adobe stock or whatever stock images that you can go through, one of my, you know, I do one of the gyms actually has stock images available, and it's very good. I'd never run out of laundry images, I can tell you that. And it's the most amazing, ridiculous images of laundry stuff, right? So, you know, that is the other one. So clearly either way you pay, but, you know, if there's stuff that's probably more relevant and specific you want to direct as imagery, then definitely a photographer is a good way to go. So,
well, we've got sort of, you know, I'd love to get lots of photos of staff just doing things. Like the lab is interesting. People are always wanting to know what goes on in a lab. So there's lots of equipment and consumables and things that we can get shots of.
And so as much as anything, well, I'll finish off this little audit side of things, but so YouTube, clearly, again, we would create, I think you said, did you tell me in the past? So so clearly there was a little bit that was searchable around, I think the old brand name, because of what people had probably loaded up for you. But I think you told me that you use Vimeo. And I think you said there was some reasons for that.
At the time it was some concerns about having a lack of control about what appears around your YouTube's content, I guess. You know, things like ads, or like what comes next after your YouTube content might be, I don't know, I can't remember what it was. Anyway, there was a reason.
I have a feeling, my gut feeling is that, and I don't think it matters what channel you watch a video on, right? The most likely the next video that follows depends on what I'm following, and what I'm typically so typically you know, so probably, given I've got a 6-year-old, it'll probably be like, you know, a reading eggs or ABC, you know, so but that would be my, certainly from a given Google owns YouTube, and given you're running conferences and all sorts of things, and given and mind you can do certain things, Vimeo is a great platform, and it enables you to embed your video, just to my knowledge, not as easily as what you can embed a YouTube video right into your website. And so you're just thinking about the cycle of that. So I use it for myself, and certainly we recommend it for the clients as well. When you're embedding your YouTube videos into the website, and then you can choose to watch it on the YouTube channel for the company anyway. And it could be just highlights from the conference, or it could be the, you know, the CEO's latest message, or whatever it might well be. There's just a whole lot of spin-off benefits for an organization like yours in terms of profile and that sort of thing. So, which to some degree, and the other thing is what controls. I mean, I would say 80% of the videos that I load to my YouTube, including, you should probably send me this one, I'll put it to and put it for us, but effectively is unlisted private videos for us only, right? So, and you might find that's the other thing as an organization, you may find there's some advantages to that sort of thing. I don't know. But certainly with many businesses, there's often advantages to having just a channel so you can upload video that you can keep for yourselves, right? So,
Okay. Yeah.
or even staff training. I don't know if there's things like that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yep. So, yeah. Anyway, I've become a bit of I must admit, I've become having systemized a lot of stuff on my business. I've become, yeah, quite YouTube. I kind of use it. I think, well, am I going to need this again, or is somebody going to watch this? So it's sort of how I've just found it's become a habit. And so once that happens, it's sort of, yeah, it's hard to stop yourself just from videoing everything. And sometimes it's probably, yeah, anyway, whether it's warranted or not all the time, I'm not sure, but it certainly is warranted from a ownership of brand because it's a Google product. Yep. It's a bit like, you know, Facebook, Instagram, Google, YouTube. Essentially, as soon as you've got it. And in actual fact, even if you were to do any, let's say Google advertising, I find I spend a similar amount on Google as to what I do on Facebook, right? So, which is unusual because most people spend a lot more on Google. But my Google ads actually appear on YouTube, you know, so at times, so I can see them because it is the same owner, effectively.
Yeah, okay.
So this is just a model. I don't know if you had the chance to have a look at this, but you know, clearly you're in a well and truly established business with its business strategies that's been running. You told me, I think, more than 50 years. Is that correct? Yeah.
Although it's a changing business strategy.
Yeah, that's right. It's been a changing business, but clearly you don't, particularly in the not-for-profit space, and you know, survive that long without having a good business model. Or whilst there's always better things that can be done, and as you said, the marketing and sales element is something that you're improving at the moment. Clearly, as a business, you know who the customers are for the business, right? You know the various. In this case, this is too simple for your business because there's multiple offers, right, in terms of what you're offering for the different target audience, and in terms of your specialized, you've said you've got world leading technologies and that sort of stuff that others can't replicate, right? So clearly that's your what do they call it? It's almost an unfair advantage, right, that you have with your competitors. We've talked about content marketing is just the words you use. We're in a generation of you and your getting used far more than we and our. So I'm sure the web people may have talked about that as well, right? So everybody nowadays is looking, what's in it for me? You know, whatever I'm looking at, whether it's on your website, in your brochures, in your social media marketing, it's what's in it for me. And that could be intrinsic. What am I going to get by donating, for instance, you know, to the cause? So, and then social media clearly then works together with any other forum, you know, any email that you might have been doing, any SEO if it's relevant, any, you know, the website itself. So back in the day, mail drops, directories, we've talked about those sort of things. It's all a bit of a fruit salad when it comes to communications. And I did mention the fact as soon as you spend $1, which is how I think of promotion, and it should be said, you know, I'm a marketer, but at the end of the day, realistically, I don't work with businesses to tell them what their pricing should be or their distribution model, but I'm a bit reliant on it. You know, so ultimately, if the social media ultimately, if the business isn't, you know, knowing who it wants to talk to and how it wants to talk to those, it makes my job a whole lot more difficult, realistically. So ultimately, we sort of mentioned, you know, we want to make sure the people that we're working with are the best possible representatives of their businesses. So your LinkedIn profile is important to us, but clearly it's the business profiles that we're doing here. There may well be, I mean, probably in your sphere, there's plenty of rivals for the, probably in many ways, right? If there is things from others, particularly from a social media, that you might say, well, they do that well, we'd like to do that equally well, then, you know, always sort of raise that, particularly in a planning type exercise. And typically, and this is largely around advertising, but you're likely the current partners and customers, the sorts of people you want to get involved probably look like them. So when we're advertising, they're the people we'd go targeting for. And so you mentioned the fact that, you know, where they are. And so something like Facebook, we know that the people are now on Facebook. So it's all about people to people almost now, whether they're part of a business type or they're a business consumer facing. It's all about people sort of nowadays, right? So that's who we try and target. We've mentioned that enough now around sort of, we suggest the type of website setup along these lines, you know, with your social proofing and your call to action and any plugins. And then we grab information from the website, which is why really, as long as the website has content, there's no real day-to-day need for us to tell us what you want us to do. We sort of agree that in the planning session. You're okay, well, on Mondays, we're going to talk about services. On Tuesdays, we're going to talk about what new technologies we're doing. On Thursdays, we're going to talk about why us, I don't know, but, you know, or a new partnership that we've got or become a partner. And Friday, it might be testimonial, or it might be something along those lines about us, right? So in other words, we kind of know the stream that we're talking about, rather than the individual post that we're talking about, right? So, and generally, and certainly your website at the moment already has enough content from that sort of approach, right? And understanding that the reason we do it that way is because it's all about newsfeed. No one's going to scroll your newsfeed and see that you posted something similar 3 months earlier, right? So it's all about repurposed and just getting it in there. And so, we do the Google update and to these other 4 channels, and we are posting pretty much the same image and the same message to all those 4 channels. And we do a habit of that. We know that, you know, it doesn't need to be a not-for-profit. Small businesses, less than 50%, are on social media, and that just means, do they have a Facebook page? Because of the 50% that are on, they've whacked up a Facebook page often before they have a website. So, but of those 50%, less than 30% have ever advertised. So nowadays, it's a really crappy website / landing page, because we know that the algorithm is so poor, particularly if you're not posting to it, right? So, so hence, I was mentioning to you before that the numbers that if you're simply posting and if you have 200 people following, then on a good month, you might get a couple of hundred people seeing the posts. Yeah. Whereas as soon as we spend $1, we know that it's in the tens of thousands that can see it. And we can know that we can push people to websites and that sort of stuff. And then we do that by way of Facebook advertising. And then, if this does, and then like any marketing, it's like, okay, there's a cost to audit and consult. There's which is today and what we've done. But then if we were to proceed to the next step, is that sort of setup and planning, which is a 3 + 2 hour day. So the setup in the first place is to rebrand, add all the information. And then the planning session is about connecting. And a lot of that then does, I'm afraid to say, there is some homework involved in that in terms of how you should and who you should connect with. And often that's sort of in front of TV at the end of the day sort of time, or it's, you know, when you don't want to use too much brain space. And then it's about Facebook advertising, is who's the target audience and who should it be around saved audiences and that sort of stuff, and setting that up correctly so you can do it. And then management costs, well, we have the different levels of that, and ad campaigns, you know, you can choose whatever level. You know, clearly if it's, often what happens is, you know, people will say to me, what else? Often the what else is you could spend more, another $1. Really, that's generally, once we're doing the daily advertising or every second day, daily posting or every second day posting, often the better traction is to actually spend more on ads or spend more on content. So in other words, do other things to the website, which doesn't actually involve me often, right? So it might be writing blog posts or that sort of stuff. So that's the strategy. Any questions around that or feedback around that?
If we want to, like if Marion says, oh, can you do a post about such and such, or can you please promote so-and-so's announcement or post? How do we manage that? Like, you know, can I continue to post from, you know, the
that
account?
happens a lot. So that we get that question a lot. So you've got a couple of options around that, right? So if it's time sensitive, needs to go out tomorrow, then, well, you got, again, even with that, there's 2 options. You know, I schedule pretty much Monday to Monday. So in other words, I've always done my Monday post for the week. But if you've got something that has to go out, and Steve, I want it to go out across all of our channels, you can simply send it to me. Right. So I can do it that way. equally, I don't think people should be, you know, I often encourage people, you know, let's say it is the conference, and it's the launch and it's the opening and I'm not there, and you've got a photo and it's, did you say Marion?
Yeah.
Your Marion is up there talking, you might do a photo. Rather than send that photo to me, you could maybe just use Facebook Business Suite and and hopefully you'd feel confident enough to go, here's a photo, and post it to your Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, for instance, and then that just goes out immediately. So often real-time photos and real people and that sort of stuff are the more popular, right? So it's Kate's 5th year anniversary, you know, or whatever the case might be, because it's real people, and that other post proved that really in a way when it's people we know and that sort of stuff. So yeah, there's nothing to stop you. There is a thing of over posting to some degree, but that would rarely happen. So you know, as I said, some clients, if we're doing 2 posts a day anyway, right? So it's more the fact is you don't want to be posting 5 times a day, because that really does often have a knock on the algorithm. But yeah, they're absolutely happy for you to post. Many of our clients will say, oh, if I'm posting this, is that going, you know, I'm going to do this tomorrow afternoon, is that okay? You know, so, and you can use the Publer. You have access so we create the Publer scheduler. We create a free version for you. But then at the same time, we upgraded immediately into our version. So you'll never use that free version. And you also have access to our upgraded version, which means photos are watermarked. And so you can use it as the owner of those platforms. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Because I was worried about, like, you know, if I'm just posting it straight out of the, you know, straight out of my phone on Twitter, is it going to muck up the analytics?
No. So again, most of this stuff can't go wrong. And whenever, as in you can't break it, and you can't really, you know, you're not going to impact anything. And things like Twitter's a good example of when I go to conferences, I Twitter like a, you know, like nobody's business, right? And I expect that that's what you should do. If you're running the conference, realistically, surprisingly, I don't have a lot of people that ask me in to do that real-time stuff, because I could do it, right? And I'm very adept at doing it, right? So that's always also something that, you know, the only ones that actually did use me to do that, as I said, was ACPO back in the day. So, but there's a real good opportunity at times for that live time multiple polls, because it's used in a different way. We're not using it in the same way as we're doing it on a day-to-day, right? But yeah, so you can't overpost, and you're all fine with that sort of stuff. So yeah, just back to why we do it. We clearly want to protect the revised new brand name across all the different socials. We want to differentiate you against almost the industry as much as the field and any competitors. Clearly, we want you to be top of mind with those target audiences. And ultimately, we want to increase the business opportunity, whatever that looks like. And, you know, you'll be well placed to, you know, clearly with the multiple different, you're a very different business to, you know, even Jesse, for instance, who introduced us, you know, HR Guru is very different to, you know, the photographer in our network or whatever it might well be, you know. So, but ultimately, it generally comes down to the same point: is what is the point of doing this, right? You want to increase some form of business opportunity, usually, right? So, and we do that by creating the pages and planning and doing the planning session and the Facebook side of things. So, as I said, today with the audit and consult, we don't charge the 407 unless people say, well, okay, thanks for that. Thanks for the proposal. I've got that now. You know, whatever they might be doing, COVID strikes or whatever happens. We don't charge usually the 407. We usually charge the 202.50, 203.50. It shows I haven't got my glasses on. If people then proceed to the setup session, basically. So, so we waive that today, realistically, the consult side of things. And then, the pricing around that 5-hour day is $1,000 day, thereabouts. But particularly for yourself, who's been involved for a while, you'll find that all of a sudden you'll have a lot of that sense of your car is completely in order and you know how you're going to drive it. You know what I mean? Particularly where you've got that sort of custodianship within a business like yours. And so, I think that'll give you a lot of strength in the knowledge of that, right? All of a sudden you'll know that they're all set up and you've got access and able to run this vehicle, this communications vehicle. And then it's just a matter of looking at what sort of, you know, posting schedule you might want to do. Most
Yeah.
typically people are in this excess to small, and it might be that you sort of do that small one. There's nothing to stop you. As I said, I wasn't sure if you're a bit like Akbo, if you wanted to do a 2 post today, but I think if it would probably be a massive jump from something you've not been doing any realistically. So maybe a small business type approach would be the best approach in the first instance, potentially.
Yeah. Well, look, we were certainly doing quite a lot last year.
Oh, you have, okay.
Because I had someone who was, you know, kind of learning on the job, and she was really great in doing it, but she's moved into another role. So I think we'd be happy with 2 posts a day. Okay. We just need to make sure that the content is there, and so I'm sort of trying to figure out, well, I think if we start off while we're still on our old website, then, you know, we'll just be really careful about the planning. Because and at the moment everything's about the conference and COVID, but I think once the new website is up and running and that content is being regularly kind of, you know, enriched, then I think that approach would be great.
Well, I think and what I was going to say, I think, and that's often the case, is that it particularly as the website evolves, clearly I'll be wind of all that, right? But we'll also have in mind, so when we do the planning session, it is about just confirming, okay, we've got these key sort of areas, right? So the way I typically look at, you know, so that clearly you've got these funnels, if you like, for want of a better term, right? You've got pathology, and within pathology, you've got 4 different elements, right? Digital health's not going anywhere, right? That's still a main function.
we still have it.
So then within digital health, you've got products and that sort of stuff, right? So so here you've got with the population health, which is that the main, what's the main sort of, is this the main sort of focus, would you say, or is that
no, look, I mean, it's hard to describe. I mean, pathology is huge for us. That's and all of our practitioner audience is interested in the pathology side of things. Digital health sort of waxes and wanes a little bit, but there's certainly a marketing strategy around our CanScreen technology, which is basically an information management system for cancer screening or vaccination registries. And then population health, again, that's often very project based, so things kind of change over time. And I guess, you know, we want to be promoting things like, you know, where we're working with partnership with other countries or organisations, you know, what are we currently doing? And so I suspect there'd be a lot more content coming out of our kind of news articles and that sort of thing.
And the thing to that point is that we're not really reliant on that. So, and just looking at this, we there's no way we'd be. It's great, as I said, when there's new content coming in, and that's clearly everybody's first question of me often, right? Is particularly from bigger, more professional organization, or don't we have to be having new content? Well, reality is no, you don't, right? It's great if you've got it, but nobody's repurposing their content, and so it's not getting into the feed already. So literally it would be just sort of, you know, there's a couple of ways to sort of think about it. Do you and I should say on Wednesdays normally, and we maybe Wednesdays would be slightly different even for you, but for most of our clients, Wednesdays, we don't do anything about you at all. We actually go in and try and find a partner, a strategic partner. So in your news feed, we'll be liking their stuff, and potentially we'd be sharing something from one of your strategic partners back to your site, right? And it might be that we do it for
that quite a lot.
And often, well, that's funny because that you say that, because often that's a strategy that many businesses, that's their only strategy. So in actual fact, because maybe one of the partners, let's say, has their act together and they're producing content, and so often people will use that content and share it back, and that's often very good for the partner, but it's generally not necessarily so good for you. So so what then it's just a matter of working out how do we, and it wouldn't matter in this case, right? Because if we're only doing it, you know, but it might be that we actually say, well, okay, on this, the first Wednesday of the month is going to be this partner, second Wednesday is going to be this Wednesday, third Wednesday, and so on, right? So that might be the strategy. And in that way, we might not actually share it from the feed. We actually might go to their websites and actually share something more juicy. And actually share something across from the website. And it might be that we do 2 partners on Wednesdays, for instance, and we just finish up doing 10 posts a week, but we're actually doing it in that particular way. So yeah, there's it'll be a moving feast to a degree, but I don't think the titles will change that much. I think the streams will be relatively similar. They might chop and change over time, but I think the streams are what we'd sort of plan around in the first place, around content and what we share. So yeah, so
I like that approach. It gives some real structure, which is helpful.
yeah, well, it's real train track stuff, isn't it? Right. So it just means that that there's always that it's shared proportionally as well. That you sort of and again, that's your choice. You might say, well, we want a bit more push around this side, and it could be, sometimes it can be seasonal too. It might be, well, at this time of year, it's really important that we focus more on this part. But that's something, we don't go away, but, the idea is, and the other thing is reporting. I should sort of say the difference between the different levels. So clearly, once you get to the small and small to medium, we're reporting every month. So we're sort of saying what is the reach and the traffic and that sort of stuff telling us, right? Clearly we want to get the engagement, but the main thing we want people to do, particularly around the advertising, is get people going through and checking out the information, right? So, and I don't know if you've had access to that sort of stuff before, but the flare that goes, the little pixel that goes on the website pretty closely marries up with your Google Analytics. And so whilst I don't get the same full gambit of analytics, what it tells me is 800 people or 1,300 flares through the website, and so that suggests to me, okay, well, that's that then suggests either, well, it could be that we go, actually, that's light, right? It could be, okay, how do we build that, in terms of, over time as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
So,
all right. Well, look, this all sounds good to me. I'll have a chat with Marion and our Director of Corporate Services, Michelle, as well. But they're certainly keen for me to outsource this work. So
yeah, well,
I think as long
as
as
I said, I don't take it lightly. It's a great opportunity for me in terms of, and I do think it seems quite timely given the rebranding. I do like doing rebrandings because, as I said, there's that element, it then gives a fresh look to it all anyway,
and we could certainly use the help. As I said, none of us in the organisation have got any social media expertise. We've just been absolutely winging it. So and
you might find, albeit, as I said, where there might be some of this when we do the session together, you might find some of the takeaways that are helpful then when you're actually talking to the web people a little bit as well. Just might be one, there's certainly things that I'm going to say, look, we need to get this over, as I said, about the links and the pixel and plugins and stuff. But there might be a few other little things just around sort of, other just little, you'll probably have a few light bulb moments maybe as well. Sort of as you're going through potentially too. So that they
definitely, and it's perfect timing to be thinking about integrating all of that, because they've just finished the design and they've sort of built out some of the sections. So if we're going to make any changes to the landing page, for example, now is the time to do it. So
it sounds like at the moment the main thing is just going to be those little tinkering around, sort of adding icons and different things. But as you said, there could well be something that goes, there's a light bulb that goes, okay, we better do this as well. So yeah, sweet.
Great. All right. Well,
fabulous.
I've taken up far more of your time than we booked.
Normally we do allow an hour, and I don't know if we did have that little stumbling start. So as I said, it's good not to rush as well. So thanks heaps, and hopefully, if you want to feed back to me, let me know. And generally speaking, just from a timing perspective, I don't know how things work best for you. I would like to get whereby sorted. So I guess that's something that we do need to. I don't really want to have to do it on Zoom if we don't have to, because otherwise I'm going to have to ask you to send me the MP4.
Yes.
So for now, maybe just save it, and I then will load it once we know what we're doing. But hopefully we can get whereby and work out why that didn't work for us today.
Yeah,
because we
yeah.
could
And if
do
it's
that.
a problem at my end, I'll have a chat with our IT guys, see if we can do
Yeah.
that.
And what I was going
I
to
don't know
say,
why Google Meets doesn't work.
yeah,
Either.
what I was going to say is usually for us Tuesday, Thursdays is what I was going to say. So I don't know if Tuesday, so generally from a preference, it's almost Thursday, Tuesday, Friday. If people,
Yeah,
to help people in terms of from a flexibility and what works best for people. But just if you have
yeah,
that in mind, from that sort of, it generally does make sense to do it on the one day, that sort of, and we do take a break for lunch and that sort of stuff, but we can,
yeah,
it's usually more convenient and often saves people time if we do it online.
yeah, sure.
Just share screens.
All right.
Awesome.
And so apart from me, is there anyone else you would want to be part of that planning session, do you think?
I don't think so. No,
Yeah.
I don't think so. Only on it because we're talking planning more around the point of scheduling posts. So it's more your direction as the communications person, and with the knowledge of what's probably coming, is just to be able to say, look, this would be a good starting point for, around 2 posts a day. If that's what we're doing, this is where I think we're going to take them from. And I'll sort of quiz you on that, really.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, that all sounds terrific. Thank you.
Excellent,
Thanks
Kate.
so
Oh,
much
I'm really
for all
glad
of
to have been introduced by Jessie. So that's
yeah.
that's lovely. So I'll let her know we've caught up, and yeah, that's good. Did you know Jessie just through work, or?
Yeah, she does quite a lot of HR consulting for us. She works quite closely with Michelle
Okay.
on recruitment and managing HR issues.
Yeah, she's fun. I don't know
Great.
if you've had much time with Jessie, but she's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, no, she's always nice to have a meeting with, and we always seem to be on the same page about things. So
yeah. She's an absolute hoot, I tell you. I see her every week. So on Business Network, she's a real hoot. She's our president actually at the moment. So the business network that we're in. Yeah, so she's
fabulous.
And her and I have kids of the same age as well. So so it's quite good to have that sort of, on one hand, you kind of got to be this, and then the next time you're talking about, oh, the hell, back on Zoom for the kids. It's like, So, yeah, but it is good. All right, well, great. Well, have a good rest of the day, and we'll speak to you soon. What's the cat's name?
That's Jinx. He's famous.
Jinx. Well, next time I see famous cat. All right, see you, Kate. Bye.
See you, Steve. Take care.
Bye.